For many generations now, both told by word of mouth, movies, TV, and as well as being bound by paper, the genre of the ghost story is something that has persisted throughout time and has even seen new life thanks to the internet with the invention of what are called creepypastas. Even today, I hear about all sorts of bizarre tales and accounts that have recently happened or have been documented. I thoroughly enjoy watching the many YouTube videos that reportedly showcase apparent real stories and pieces of footage that showcases quote unquote genuine evidence of the paranormal. Whereas I do know that in a world full of advanced technology and the seemingly limitless means and results of editing software could very well lead to all of this being fake. Not to mention that in the world of YouTubers that get blinded with greed with certain individuals, this is another factor that could lead to more variations of staging. I still love watching this genre of video content on the platform because the subject matter is so powerfully intriguing and fascinating for me. One of the best channels to display and showcase documents of these stories is Nuke's Top 5. I will be critical here for a moment and say that the way the videos themselves are titled is and or are pretty terrible, but they are actually pretty damn fantastic in terms of content. Not to mention that the videos themselves may have more stories shown in them than what the title will present. For example, a top 10 could very easily be a top 13. But this is more in line with keeping viewer attention and not really a negative point I'm bringing up here. For example, I think a top 10 titled video would generally be more clickable than a top 13 because of the meta on YouTube with list videos. Nuke's older videos appear to have ranged around 10 to 15 minutes, but most of the modern uploads average at around 25, with some close to touching the 40-minute mark. They overall showcase and display a very well handled blend of what could very well be ghosts and things that could have a more human explanation to the proceedings. Regardless of what they are in terms of a potential origin, the episode will continue to maintain a fantastic and creepy atmosphere, even if it does flip-flop between the supernatural and the, well, natural. On YouTube, I have a playlist belonging to my channel Pitch Skull Black that is simply called Videos for Me Which a Favourite Can't Do Justice. It's home to any videos that I feel that I liked so much that a simple favourite wouldn't accurately describe my love. Rhyme or reason is non-existent in the playlist, but included are some of these videos, at least 4. This list type channel is just one of several examples of how the paranormal is tackled on YouTube. Here is presented as a mixture of stories about a certain place and videos showing unexplainable events within the location talked about. As I mentioned underneath my main old channel, I created a playlist featuring some of Nuke's videos. However, there is a larger one that I have created that is focused generally on the paranormal, mainly ghosts and stories related to them, that features even more videos by him. Simply titled Paranormal Things is basically an archive for the numerous videos I have watched on the subject matter over the years, from the likes of the channels that I have mentioned. As well as this, I also add clips and even full episodes of movies and TV shows that I have watched during the course of my hobby and interest with the supernatural. I would have said that pretty much everything within spans the spectrum of the ghostly preternatural and what can be related to this in terms of accounts of events and stories. Whereas it is mostly YouTube made content, things made by TV studios and movie studios have ended up on here thanks to uploads of either clips or full installments. For example, you can find the 3 surviving episodes of BBC's Dead of Night series, various episodes of A Ghost Story for Christmas, and other bits and pieces like the full series of The Green Man from the 1990s. So whereas it does travel the various frontiers of the paranormal in regards to what I have mentioned already, it also gives a look at what TV shows I have discovered in recent years since branching out from what is essentially my comfort zone of Doctor Who. One of the more significant programs I feel that is within my library of discs is the now since mostly destroyed anthology series Mystery and Imagination. Edgar Allan Poe was one of the most famous authors of the horror genre ever, creating many macabre adventures that are still ingrained into the minds of a lot of modern day fans of the genre who have heard his name and looked back into his work. Various movie adaptations and other television creations have been brought into the light over the decades, displaying a story or stories by him in a new, performed light. In my mind, then, it is all the more fitting then that a horror TV show should be named after what is the generally most known name for a collection of his work. Despite seemingly being named in inspiration by Edgar's work, only 2 of his stories were adapted by makers of the program, which were The Fall of the House of Usher, making for the 3rd episode in Series 1, and The Telltale Heart, which was the 5th episode in Series 3. Because of practices at the time, and like with many programs made in the 1960s, only the former of those 2 can be viewed today. Videotape was still seen as expensive at the time by British companies like the BBC, and they didn't have as good of a foresight into the preservation of their productions as America seemed to have had, as many of their shows are still with us today, whether it be The Twilight Zone or The Outer Limits. Unfortunately, because of this, Mystery and Imagination is one of those television shows that is missing a large part of it. Across 5 series, a total of 24 episodes were made, only 8 of which can be viewed today. Terence Feely worked alongside with producer of the show Jonathan Alwyn in the creation of it, with the former being quoted in the DVD booklet as saying that he and Alwyn read through more than 400 Victorian stories to try and discover ones that were suitable for being dramatised within their new show. A list of 13 stories was eventually settled on, and the original intention was to screen 2 series of 7 and 6 episodes respectively in the beginning of 1966 and at the end of the same year using this collection. With a slight episode modification in terms of count, an overall banner of 3 series comprising of 7, 5 and 6 episodes were made at that point and era of the show. All of these were around 50 minutes in length. A following collection of 6 episodes making series 4 and 5 were made and were all 80-minute television movie adaptations. Only 2 from the first 3 series and the 6 TV films are left in the archives today. Network released a DVD set collecting the remaining installments of the series and presented it so that the series 4 and 5 episodes were the main features, with the other 2 being bonuses on a 4th disc. Along with these productions spread across a quartet of discs, an informative booklet is paired with the set that goes into detail about the show as well as all of the made episodes, plot and production wise. Colour episodes from the show are included within the pages as well, including one for each of the episodes that are matched up to the respective sections. Having viewed what is left of the series thanks to the box set, I can say that whereas I have mixed feelings on the television movie productions of the 4th and 5th series, this package overall proved to be an exciting and tantalising glimpse at what appeared to have been a great TV show. Frankenstein was an unusual adaptation for me, and I fell somewhere in the middle in terms of liking it. Definitely had good moments to it, and I recall it having some good ideas with the monster, but for me it fell a bit flat. overall. At the time, I had recently finished with the film series by Hammer, which is a fantastic collection of movies in my opinion. So maybe I had some form of very high expectation built up from coming off of the movies, being the Hammer ones, as well as the original 1930s Universal Frankenstein adaptation, which is just absolutely superb. Not to mention that I'm a massive fan of the story, despite not having read the original text, but still I was left cold by this episode. Uncle Silas and Dracula from Series 4 overall make this one the strongest series of the two complete ones left, both of which for me score about a 9 out of 10 each. Both very well made and atmospheric gothic pieces of television, and watching Denholm Elliott as Dracula is a great performance, and was, in a way, special for me as I love his portrayal of the signalman in the 1970s adaptation of said Charles Dickens story. Now, despite myself having just said that Series 5 is the weakest of the two complete batches of episodes, the opener, The Suicide Club, is actually my favourite of these main presentations from the DVD set. People that have reached the end of their life mentally and feel that they cannot go on join a mysterious club that consists of all people like themselves. The gathering kills off the members in a unique way by having them gather around a table and being dealt a face-down card. Of the group that receives a card, two of which unknowingly receive a special one that are effectively death marks. The duo of these recipients then go into a battle of their lives until one man is left alive, who then is put back into the loop of the club and the cycle repeats. Only question is, when do the moralistic feelings become too strong in the proceedings? Whereas there are 3 of the films that I can easily skip, the set alone for me is worth it for this episode, along with the 2 from Series 4 that I liked, and the remaining Series 1 episodes. Dark, grim, and well made, this macabre gothic play of morality is one I strongly recommend checking out, and is the highlight of this set. The chronological closing episode, The Curse of the Mummy, is another one that didn't really do much for me, although it did have its moments and I didn't really get Sweeney Todd at all. I don't really have much or anything to say on these two. For me, they exist and that's about it. Although I will mention that Sweeney Todd had some excellent visuals to it. The Fall of the House of Usher from Series 1 is a fantastic surviving episode of gothic drama in my opinion. It and The Open Door are 2 great episodes and ones to check out, the latter of which is a very enjoyable ghost story with some exceptionally creepy moments, with it in turn being the only one of that type existing from the show, at least in my interpretation of the stories. Mystery and imagination was a significant moment in the history of British television horror, and effectively was there at the end of a noteworthy decade for this type of TV programs, and at the start of another. However important and or significant as it may be, it is also representative of the sad fact that a lot of these small screen collections from this decade are now mostly gone. Even saying that only a third of this particular main one is left is still calling it quite lucky. To go over some of the more major ones that I know about, from 1961 through to 1963, screened 3 series under the title of Tales of Mystery, comprising of 25-minute episodes that were all based on the stories of Algernon Blackwood. It apparently had the actor John Laurie introducing each one in character as the author, seemingly in a similar style as to how Rod Serling did with The Twilight Zone. However, of the 29 installments produced, not a single one is left. In the 1970s, a highly controversial series, mainly because of Mary Whitehouse, called The Omega Factor, was broadcasted and made. This followed a man known as Tom Crane, as played by James Hazeldine, and a woman being Dr. Anne Reynolds, as played by Louise Jameson, investigating the paranormal. Best way I can describe this show is, imagine a 10-episode miniseries prototype of The X-Files, but with a holistic focus on ghosts and no extraterrestrials. Whereas we are lucky to have all of the episodes in the archive of that one, there is another similar sounding show from a decade earlier that has fared nowhere near as well. Simply titled Haunted, this was a series from 1967 and 1968 that starred Patrick Mower as a university lecturer called Michael West, who had ventured around Britain looking into reported paranormal phenomena through an investigatory style. 8 60-minute colour episodes is what made up the single season of the show, and unfortunately none of them are watchable today. A famous Gothic author was Sheridan Le Fanu, who is known for their vampire story Carmilla. This particular tale is a part of 5 novellas that were the bricks for the book In a Glass Darkly, that featured stories about ghosts and vampires. The 7th overall episode of Haunted was actually called Through a Glass Darkly, so I think it is feasible to speculate that some of this particular book was adapted for the show. For the last of the 4 lost horror shows from the 1960s that I would also like to mention is late night horror. From my perspective of looking at these types of television shows, this seems to be one of the most talked about. It ran for a single series over 6 25-minute episodes and was cancelled because of complaints from viewers, which, knowing some of what I know, I am not surprised in the slightest. Now, for me to fully talk about this program here in this section, I'm going to issue both a spoiler warning and a graphic content warning for the next good chunk of this video. In a similar style to Mystery and Imagination for the most part, it was all adaptations of short stories. No Such Thing as a Vampire was based on a story by Richard Matheson, who is known for the book I Am Legend and contributions to the original series of The Twilight Zone. William and Mary was based on a story by Roald Dahl, and the source material would also become episodes of Way Out and Tales of the Unexpected. During production of this video, I ended up watching the formerly mentioned version of the story after having recently started watching the show. Personally, I thought it was a great, albeit quite macabre, 25-minute piece of television. If you've been online for a while now, you may have heard of various videos showing disturbing content or acts from the real world, one of which being vintage footage from a Russian experiment where they were able to keep a severed dog head responsive with artificial systems like blood flow. Now, I'm not going to show that clip, but imagine that, but with a human brain, and you have a pretty good idea as to the plot of William and Mary. In consideration of how notoriously violent late night horror reportedly was, I dread to think how it approached this adaptation. And on the topic of violence from the show, we have the single surviving installment, The Corpse Can't Play. This next one was based on John Burke's story, Party Games. The show was shown once in 1968, and a repeat followed across late 1969 and early 1970. However, after this it was wiped. During 1984, it was discovered that a private collector had a copy of the just mentioned episode in the form of a 16mm black and white telerecording. At the time, an attempt to purchase the print was made, but was done too late as it was sold just 10 minutes beforehand. A whole 32 years passed until the episode appeared on eBay in the mid-2010s. archival and media preservation company Kaleidoscope was able to safely secure the print and began restoration work. In 2017, the BFI screened the episode at their Missing Believed Wiped event of that year. Announced in February 2022 and later released in May of the same year, Kaleidoscope put together a package of the show. It comprises of a DVD disc that has a black and white and a colour restored presentation of the episode, along with a surviving television promo as presented by Valentine Dahl, and also a piece on the restoration of the episode. This disc is then also paired with a full book about the show. To give a plot summary of this surviving entrant, and also in turn to give an idea as to why this show was so controversial, a party for a boy named Ronnie is going well. The doorbell rings. Opening it, expecting to find her husband that she's been waiting on, the mother finds a disliked, by Ronnie, young individual called Simon Potter. The episode ends with the husband and or father being murdered and dismembered with gardening equipment, the body parts then being used in the proceedings of the children-orientated party. Personally, I do not own a copy of this book and DVD package, but I am extremely curious to get it now, because this to me seems like an extremely boundary-pushing and twisted moment for the history of British television horror. Stories by H. Russell Wakefield, Robert Ackman, and Sir Arthur Conan Doyle are what comprise the last half of the series, with The Triumph of Death, The Bells of Hell, and The Kiss of Blood. As we can see, many of the acclaimed to be great horror shows of the 1960s are gone, and overall is just an unfortunate scenario of how things were done back in those days. Many of these programs may remain lost forever, unless some kind of miracle happens and a print is returned, like with The Corpse Can't Play. The majority of this golden age of television has been and may stay lost to time. However, with the 1970s realm of television horrors, there is luckily barely anything in terms of cases of missing episodes from what I can see, with many quality programs being existent in the archives. To me, one of the best and most noteworthy series produced during that time period is still with us, and it is called A Ghost Story for Christmas. Omnibus was a documentary series that ran for 35 years on the BBC, winning numerous awards. During the second year of its run, an unusual choice was made to produce a 45-minute adaptation of the ghost story Oh Whistle and I Will Come to You, My Lad. This was adapted and directed by Jonathan Miller and starred Michael Hordern. It was extremely well received and in turn inspired the just mentioned TV series from the 1970s. In the early 2000s, the series had its first breath on physical media with a standalone DVD release. This was one of 3 of the supernatural horror productions of mostly the 1970s to be released this way, with the others being A Warning to the Curious and The Signalman. During the early stages of the next decade, the BFI released it on DVD again, along with, at the time, all of the A Ghost Story for Christmas productions on disc. This new release features the 1968 production paired with a 2010 adaptation of the story, which to my eyes is both a new adaptation and a remake of the original production. This volume has a couple special features in it, such as Neil Brand reading the original story, an introduction to the story on the whole by Ramsey Campbell, and that aforementioned name reading his own story inspired by the original author of Whistle.